Hey everybody, this is a quick voiceover. I did see Suicide Squad and I wanted to go into some specifics about why I think Jared Leto's character comes off poorly and why I think people are upset about it. First, of course, we didn't get to see a lot of him in the film, which starts us off on a bit of a negative angle. And the part that we did see had a significant problem in that we were really only shown a one-dimensional character. He has tattoos, he likes Harley Quinn, and he's a criminal who beats people up. And that's really all we get to see him do in his limited screen time. First of all, like we talked about in the last video, this isn't really believable. Just like nobody's perfect, nobody's totally imperfect. Most people who know about writing can tell you that any good villain sees themselves as a hero. In reality, what makes them a villain starts with their head. Their idea of what's right is incorrect. And that's kind of the requirement to make a believable character. So right off the bat, you can't really buy into what you're seeing. And you have this reaction in those cases, like trying to start a lawnmower when it won't go. And that's frustration. You want something out of the character, and when it's flat like that, you're not getting it. But the thing is, that's actually amplified in this case. We think worse of what we get here exactly because the Chris Nolan version set such a high bar. It created such a powerful emotional impression for those reasons inside and outside the story. You see, if the Leto Joker had come along without the Chris Nolan version, people would probably like it much more, because they would be comparing it to the comics, and they'd probably appreciate some of the darker and more modern touches, like the tattoos and the metal teeth, kind of like we talked about in the grittiness video. But instead, we had our bar set really high, and as a result, we ended up in this spot of anger, because our anger actually comes from the gap between our expectation and the result. You know, if you wanted more out of the character, you expected more to feel and think about, and you didn't get it. It's like trying to take a bite of your food and getting a mouthful of air. Air is the most normal thing to have in your mouth, unless you're expecting a steak. So that's the principle, which is the same way that spoiled kids are created. They get an unrealistic set of expectations. And in this case, it makes things worse for the character. And there's also the issue of it being pretty airy. For example, his whole backstory with Harley Quinn, which is really the original thing that we haven't seen in a Batman movie before. We want to know. We want clues about how their relationship forms, what it means to them, why they like each other so much. And at least for me personally, there was really not much there. Take, for example, the "I'm gonna hurt you really, really bad" scene. Like we talked about in the Star Trek video, our intellectual satisfaction comes from the ideas that cause events to happen. He's about to do something we haven't seen the Joker do. In that flash of a scene, he's going to bring her in and create an ally. How does the Joker do that? We want to pick that up based on what the Joker does. And she even asks him, "What are you going to do to me?" And he just says, "I'm going to hurt you really, really bad." That's an empty answer. It's just generic hurting people without any reason behind it. It's the same thing as what we showed in the Star Trek video. In Independence Day, when they ask the alien what they want from humanity and the alien just says die, they're not only nothing burgers, they actually come off like the filmmakers aren't trying. And I think that angers people, even if we don't consciously realize it. So in terms of your internal and external emotions, you've got two sources of bad feelings contributing to the issue. Now, maybe there's more to that sequence after all. There's the whole scene with the vat that turns her into Iggy Azalea. But in terms of the cut of the movie that we got for our money in the theater, it's not there. But anyway, along those same lines with unconscious things, there's a weird sort of button, a sort of silent button we have, that I think also got hit with Leto's performance. He's playing a character in a movie, no doubt, but like we said, the character doesn't have dimension. But it's not just that he has very little good side or believable worldview. He also, and this is really important, he also doesn't have weakness. And that's a big issue. He comes off like he's trying to be very cool and own everybody in every scene. This is dangerous because of how we perceive that type of behavior in real people. Because it seems like it's a put-on. Like it's someone trying to come off unrealistically cool. And we tend to resent that. It's not just that it doesn't work for the story of the movie, it comes off like the person in question is being a poser, or a phony, or dishonest. And, in at least a small way, our real instincts kick in to not like that person and want to tear them down or expose them. And the thing with that, which is particularly nasty, is that our brain, in the way we've talked about, where it processes all these things at the same time, actually makes us feel as though Jared Leto, the person, is the phony. It blames him. But Jared Leto didn't write or direct the movie, so a lot of those choices probably weren't even his. But it doesn't matter, you know. I haven't seen anybody say that David Ayer, the director, created a thin character. No, we put it all on Jared Leto. It's a perfect example of us taking that feeling and placing it as though there was no distinction between the movie and the real world. No one writes the people you meet, so you blame phony behavior in the world on those people because they're the ones responsible for how they act, which isn't the case here. Nonetheless, the end result of it is that we take those emotions, the limited believability and dimension, the lack of underlying ideas, that extra disappointment coming down from the Nolan movies, and that put-on aspect, and we chalk it up to the first thing we see in front of us. You know, that's part of the risk that actors take. They get extra credit and extra blame. And in this case, because of those things, some of which are under his control and a lot of which aren't, we blame Jared Leto and his performance and direct a backlash at him. Hope this was interesting, and I'm going to go back to work on the next vid. Thanks.